Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to week 3, day 5, Friday of Devtoberfest. It's CAP, my favorite day of the week. And wonderfully, we have Christian Georgi from the CAP team with us. I'll introduce Christian in a second. So just to let you know, so today we have quite a few CAP sessions. We've also got a Fun Friday session. I think it's actually our fearless leader, Tom Young from the Developer Advocates, but more on that later. So Christian is here from the CAP team and is going to kick off today's session on CAP topics at Devtoberfest, talking about what's new and what's hot with the CAP tools. So Christian, welcome first of all, and yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then off you go.
Thank you so much, DJ. Yeah, welcome to also from my side. Quite honored as always to be part of the Devtoberfest series here at YouTube, and we thought why not have a bit of an update on CAP tools. We did that, I think, last year also. We did that at Recap, so I think it's a good tradition to continue that. And let's dive right in. By the way, I'm from CAP Tools team. You might have guessed, a development manager there and caring for holding things together, so to say, and promoting things to the world. So great. Let me share my screen, I guess, right?
Yes.
Teacher?
So while
That's the
Christian's
next
sharing your
step.
screen, let me just say that put your thoughts, your comments, your opinions in the chat in YouTube. I'll relay them after Christian's finished. All questions welcome. Off you go, Christian.
Cool. Thank you so much. As said, CAP tools, what's new and hot? That's the topic of today. And basically, we'll just doing demos. Just have one slide as a very, very coarse grained agenda. IntelliJ support about things about CDS add, testing, linting, Typer, deployment, CI. And then there's also more to come in other sessions. So let's dive right in. IntelliJ support. Let me switch to my IntelliJ instance. You might know or not know, we also can run the CAP tools, the editor specifically, in IntelliJ. You see that here we have full-fledged editor support powered by the LSP, the Language Server Protocol, that we also use in VS Code or in Vim even, right, VI. So that's basically here as well with all the goodies that you have, like the peak preview, the code completion, of course, the navigation, references, symbols, the outline. You see all of that is there, right? Quite a nice thing. So that we have had that, I don't know, since 1.5 years or so. The thing that we added there, because we got that feedback, was, hey, it's great, but we usually to use the community edition of IntelliJ. That's good enough for us, but we can't run your tools because they apparently seem to be dependent on commercially available things only in IntelliJ. And we listened to that, and guess what? What you see here is the community edition of IntelliJ. So all of what you've just seen and more now also runs in the community edition that is available for free, IntelliJ IDEA in that case. And inside here in SAP, this is typically used by Java developers. It's quite a popular IDE there. This is why we said, okay, let's also invest there at all. And yeah, this is now also available since a few months for community edition. Give it a try if you're an IntelliJ fan, and I'm sure there's quite some people amongst you who are, and give us feedback. Yeah, so that's IntelliJ support. Now let me switch to my little thingy here. Okay, CS at handle. Yeah, let's use and terminal, fresh terminal here, create a project, maybe call it whatever, Devtober, and initialize that with some tiny sample here. You can also use code completion, by the way.
Tiny sample, still my favorite.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. Right, so that's the the little sister or brother of sample, right, which is the bigger thing with Fiori, etc. This is just like one or two entities. You will see that. Okay, let's go inside and open that real quick, and also do the installation there. Let me now increase the fonts. So what you get basically with the tiny sample, right, is just, okay, one entity even, and one more in the catalog service, right? So just a very stripped down thing to just show you the very core of CDS. What typically is one of the next steps is, let's create a handler, right? And how do you do that? Okay, you need to know that a file with the very same name, just with a different ending, and needs to be in place, and you don't need to have any typos there, because otherwise it's not found. And then, okay, you greeted with an empty file. What do we do? Okay, there's probably class cat service. No, yeah, could be, but then even the code, the AI doesn't help us here really. So all in all, it was always a bit like hard to do that like by heart. So what we added was a little CDS add command to help you out. So let me quickly delete that file once again, and it's called CDS add handler. Okay. So that gets us the very same file that I've just created, but now with content and proper content, so to say, with the correct syntax, so to say. You see it's okay, it's a typical require, it's the class that inherits from something, the init method with the super init, etc., and two handlers in that case. So for each entity, basically, you create two handlers, one before create update of the entity and one after read, because that's like typical scenarios to just help you get started, so to say, and you can go from there, right? And then you can just do CDS watch, and you will see that these handlers then are picked up as you might expect that, right? So that was already our handler here.
So just to dive in there, that is fantastic. And also, maybe you could comment a little bit on a couple of things. I used to use the CDS service.impl, which of course is, I don't want to say deprecated, but it's the more traditional, the older way of doing things. So this already helps us decide, actually, no, the way forward is using this sort of class-based approach, right?
Yeah, great that you asked it. Exactly. That's like the most modern syntax that we have, right? We went through some evolutions. In the first round, we just had an anonymous function that you can just export here. That is still working also, but then we find out, hey, but with code completion, there is nothing much the IDE can do there, so that we added the impl to just have a little tweak there. But then with the advent of classes, we added that syntax, so to say.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's the most flexible syntax also. Right, so CDS add handler, always great to get started. You can always, by the way, as with any of these add things, have a --force call to overwrite what was there before, right? Because if you don't do that and re-execute that, it will just skip over and not do nothing. So that's a reassuring thing, I guess. But with --force, you can just overwrite things, which is what I will do now, because coming back here, yeah. So let's go to testing. Let's add the real samples, or like the bigger sample suite, add sample. And here I will be using --force to just overwrite what do we have there. So to just give us a bit more meat to play with. And we got these handlers fully implemented, or at least implemented to some degree. And but what is missing is tests, right? So that's another thing where you would stumble. How do I start? Which dependencies to add? Which files to add where? What's the structure of the files, etc. So CDS add test does that for us. It will give us two files for each service, one file. So by the way, these things are no longer then hardwired to the sample suite, right? They react dynamically on whatever content you have. So if you have like 4 services, they will give you 4 test files, right? And with the proper content in there, which is basically one test for, I think, the first entity that you had there in the service, and for each action, you will get another test. I think that's the logic there, right? We had to decide on how much we generate. That's just like the things work there. Please give us feedback if you see that differently, right? And these things are like then fully like bootstrapped with the call out to CDS tests, even some authentication, and then here's some things to assert against. And by the way, let's also install the dependencies, because it also adds the CDS test dependency here that I've just now installed. And you can now just execute that. Usually what you know is jest, or yeah, that's probably what you use these days. It's quite a powerful test suite. And let's see what it looks like. Yeah, it throws errors. Why is that? Because we're just like asserting to against a record that does not exist. So let's add the infamous 201 thing here to make just to make the test screen real quick, because that's a bit easier to look at. Remove that. That should now get us green tests. Yeah, I think that's. So that's the traditional test output, right? You see all the bootstrap log of the server, plus then the summary of jest, right? That's how jest prints it. As like testers that you are, diligent testers that you are, you might know that there is nowadays a built-in test runner in Node.js since I think 22 or so, 20 even, which is called Node-test, right? So that's your test runner built in, no jest needed. You can just run it. And the news here is it also works with CDS test. So we made it, so to say, compatible. And that's the output that you get there. Again, the bootstrap log from the server, and then these typical, so to say, output of the Node test runner, more specifically, the test reporter that they use, which is, I think, called TAP. Yeah, that's the TAP test reporter. That's their typical output. It's really like nice. And if you are used to it, use that or give it a try. What we found, it's still a bit like unwieldy, maybe. It's a bit like a lot of output for these little few tests, so to say. So we thought, why not add a different reporter? And we wrapped that into a executable called CDS test, which is basically nothing else than the Node test runner that we've just seen with a different reporter, right? So not a complete new test runner, and just like a different reporter. And let's give it a go, this time through the npm test thing. Why not do that? It just calls out the CDS test, and you see that's the output of that test reporter. It's very like optimized for a slim output. By default, it does not print out, by the way, the bootstrap, because in green test usually that's not necessary. But it will do if there's a failure, right? So there's some logic built in to give you just a bit more like a streamlined output, so to say. So that's the news. By the way, you could also invoke CDS-test, not like that, because it's not installed globally. You would use npx CDS test, right, to just go and find the executable. And the other wrapper that we did is CDS space test. It's a bit confusing maybe at first, but still this one just calls out to CDS test, right? It just delegates from CDSDK to here, right? If you don't want to remember all of that, just use your traditional npm tests runner on that. That's fine. Yeah, test script, so to say. All right, so that's testing. Quite a nice improvements here. Just give us feedback, and if you like it or not.
I love it. But by the way, while Christian's moving to the next thing, put in the chat if you know without looking what book 201 is from the classic books catalog. It's a classic. It's a classic title. So stick in the chat if you remember what book 201 is.
Yeah. That's interesting that these sample data persist in people's memory so much, right? Interesting. Right, so that is, yeah, CDS test and the different test runs. Now let's go to linting. Let's go to linting. For that, let me replace that handler file with something that is not quite right. And I tell you as we go what is wrong here. So, because the task now of our linter is to find the cached issues that I've added here. First thing that you usually would do if you haven't installed any CDS linting plugin, so to say, is CDS add lint. Because first of all, that will add the linting package or the ESLint plugin package, so to say, the rules package with our predefined rules. And you just need to import them. Because this is now JavaScript files, we can no longer just inject them automatically for you when executing CDS add. We cannot manipulate JavaScript so easily. That's why we just print out what you need to do. You basically just import that package. And from there, then on, you can basically use code completion. CDS config, CDS plugin. I think it's probably not installed. Let's do that one more time. Yeah. Yeah, configs, right? And then the new thing is JS, right? Because these are rules for JavaScript specifically. These things are for CDS, and the new ones are in JS. And as soon as the save it, you see it here, the lights go on as we like it or not. And let's go through these findings. In line 2, we get a warning saying CSLib CSQL is a deep import. The API is available from its facade only, from CDS facade only. So what we basically want to express here is that this is the only API facade. So everything that you need should be imported from here. Yeah, and we see basically the update. That's already our proper API replacement. So please don't do that. Or if your IDE has added that, because that's the auto import things that sometimes kick in here. This is something they produce sometimes. Please fix that. So no referencing internal implementation files, right? That's the point here, right? Even though there may be like even added offered by code completion, don't do that.
Yeah, that's definitely a bad practice.
Yes, absolutely. And this holds true, by the way, for any Node.js package, right? Don't just go in there and from their implementation pull out a file, right? Because the next time a new version is published, this might break. Yeah.
By the way, I've put in the chat a link to the JavaScript linting rules reference from Capire. So this is one of the 5. The one
yes,
that Christian just referred to is one of the 5 that's listed in there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Absolutely. So that was one thing. By the way, for the update thing specifically, you could also use the global because that has always been there. But anyways, the other thing, let's go here to the error here. What does it say? Assignment to a non-local variable inside a CDS event handler. What's that? Well, if you look closely, you see that there is a book variable somewhere. If we click on here, it leads us to here. It leads us, see that? Outside of the block, of the handler block here, to the scope here. And that's another bad practice. Never, or at least try to never access state from a global variable or store state in a more global variable and then use it in an event handler. Like store it from one event handler and then use it in another event handler, like we've seen here, because that thing is also used here, right? It's stored in here and used in here. That is road to hell, right? That's road to security issues. This could be road to tenant isolation breaches, because imagine that is data from one tenant, and then this handler is called in a different tenant. That might easily happen in multi-tenant application. Bad things will probably happen. Yeah. So whenever you do that, or you're like tempted to do that, please stop for a while and think about it. So what you should do is you always use local variables as much as you can, and the state of these variables usually always has to come from the request object, because that nicely encapsulates what is going on at that moment in time when your handler is running. Everything is in there. There's a few exceptions, a few like more globalish things, yes, but definitely try to do that and never store these variables then or the state like in a more global scope. And here in that event handler, we then just use that request variable that we have here. So that was that thing. The last thing here is that select clause, which seems to look good. Let's see what the error says. Do not use select parentheses inside SQL statements, which is prone to SQL injection. That's a bit more of a subtle thing. Not sure if you have detected the issue, because actually it looks like a valid syntax here, and you get the value of the ID variable here and the value of that book definition from over here. So what could be the issue? Well, the way this statement works first is that this string is computed. Yeah, it's basically concatenated more or less, so to say, with the ID variable coming from outside, and that whole thing is then passed onto the select statement, to the runtime, so to say. And the runtime has no chance whatsoever to maybe escape that ID thing here. Yeah, in case some malicious value is in there, runtime has no chance whatsoever to handle that issue, because it was already computed before it reached the runtime system, right? No chance. The thing you want to use, if you use these template strings here, use them without parentheses. That's the point here. Because then what is happening, the select clause, so the runtime system gets passed in the raw string with the unresolved variable plus the variables, and it can then do the validation and escaping before it goes on, right? That's why this is the safer approach than as opposed to the former one, right? So that's bad. That's better. Or if you want to avoid all these strings, use the fluent syntax from over here, right? That's of course always possible.
Just want to jump in there. I've just shared a link to the Mozilla documentation for on JavaScript for tagged templates, where it describes the way that this works. So basically, the syntax that we have now on line 19 in Christian's editor is select becomes a function that operates and gets given that whole thing, and the individual things. So if you're wondering why removing the brackets is such an important aspect, check out the template literal section of MDN, and it'll explain it.
Absolutely. So the whole system is actually very interesting to learn about, right? So you can also apply that pattern of these template literals in plain vanilla JavaScript. So you should be familiar with it. Yeah. Even outside of CAP.
And I think this is also why we can write such amazing queries in the Node.js API in CAP in almost English.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. By the way, I think also see that here. See that in the tests? Same thing.
I've written down here to ask you later on at the end, like, what the heck is going on with the .books there? But anyway, we'll maybe come to that at the end.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right. So that was testing. I think I need to speed up a bit. No, that's what linting. So the repl part I will skip over, because I think Daniel will show that anyways. And otherwise, DJ would probably do it. So I will skip over that. Watch with Typer is next. So let's quickly jump over to TypeScript land real quick. Let's go out here and create another the October TS. initialize that with what I want to use. Yeah, the tiny sample, and also the TypeScript facet and the handler facet also. By the way, you don't need to care about the order of these strings, right? You can like just add them one by one, and they will execute always in the right order. Yeah, so no need to worry about them. Right, yes, very quick. And let's increase the font size. And yeah, so we basically just added the types and the typer here. Let me quickly install the packages. And you get like the TypeScript handler variant of it. And let's see what will happen if the system is finished. Still activating extensions, so that's why I'm waiting. Now it's analyzing the TypeScript file. And yeah, what it does, it basically gives you an error, which is not a nice thing, especially like new people that are new to Typer will wonder what that is all about. Why is my model failing? That's usually the case. You have cloned the project, installed it for the first time, or created it, and then things are red. Well, Typer hasn't run yet. This is what the error comes. This is why the error comes. Basically, it's missing out that folder here, and you would before that have to call out to CPS Typer and use npx, etc., to just create these files initially. Now you can just start the project with CDS watch, and guess what? It will automatically do that for you. It will, if it's not there, create the folder, run CDS Typer, and all of a sudden, this thing is now resolvable. And you've seen your project started like as normal, using the TS file as a normal handler file, and everything is good, right? So that's the thing that we added. Typer is called for initially once you call out CDS watch. The other thing that is also done, by the way, in CDS build, there's also like a hook that contributes a new build task, which also creates these model files for you and puts them in the right places, right? So that is also taken care of. Yeah, so that's watch with Typer. Let's go back to our October project real quick. Close these guys here. And yeah, CDS debug is something that we added some months ago. So what you can do here in any project, just call out CDS debug like that, and it will just start CDS watch-debug, which then just enables the debugger, so to say. Now there's a debugger listening. And what can you do? You can then just attach the debugger, right? The application is now listening for the debugger to attach, and you can attach the debugger. Usually you select, that was too quick, attach to node process. That's a handy command that is built into VS Code. And usually it's the first entry out of the many here that is your application, and it will just start the application. You see that debug panel is now enabled, which is a sign that that the debugger is basically running, right? So that's what you can do. You might ask, is that really necessary? Because we do have the JavaScript debug terminal, which does the same thing in one step, so to say. And or I'm using whatever the debug panel here that's also working for me. So why do I need that? That's true. But there's another thing. Let's say you have an application deployed to CF. Let's say the S-Flight application here. And you can basically pass a CF application name along, so into a CS debug. Let's do that real quick. And many things will happen at once, so to say. It has found the application in CF, in your CF space. So you need to be logged into the right space, of course. It has opened an SSH tunnel to the application, and then opens the Chrome DevTools with the right, so to say, ID. and so that the complete debugger is ready for the application to stop at the breakpoint, right? So quite a convenient thing. Let me demonstrate that real quick. I set a breakpoint and I have the application open here. And let's maybe click here and the debugger stops, right? In the Chrome debug tools. By the way, that's even a TypeScript file, not even a JavaScript file. So also the source maps for JavaScript to TypeScript are in place, so to say. That is really convenient. When would you use that in favor of your IDE? Imagine a scenario when where a colleague comes to you and say, "Hey, there's an issue with that deployed application. Could you look at that?" And you're not sure like how to set up that application. You haven't set it yet in your local workspace. You are not sure which version got deployed there. And this is where this is helpful because you can just put that in debug mode and the sources are coming from the deployed application. So these are not the sources from your IDE because you haven't even cloned it, maybe. They're coming from the debugger, so to say, the application in the correct version. So this will always have the correct version of the application. While in your local setup, you might have a different version and then you have a source mismatch, etc. Right? So this is a use case for like, I would call ad hoc debugging of deployed applications. Yeah. It only works for Node.js, by the way. If Java, we are missing like this, the source fetching part. That's not in debug protocol, but at least for Node.js, it's there and it's quite handy for these scenarios. Okay, one more thing. CDS up is available. That is a replacement for, well, you want to basically deploy the application. How you do that? Well, you need to remember the mbT build command. You need to remember that there's a cf deploy command. Yeah, for Kubernetes, it's even more. You need to containerize and create Helm charts and everything. And CDS up basically does that for you. It just like is a series, well, if you have installed all dependencies, and this will also work. It's a series of just like CDS or mbT builds, cf deploy, and one or two more commands. They are highlighted here in blue, right? So mbT builds, and then the cf deploy is happening, and yeah, and one or two more. Yeah, cf deploy, see all in one series. It's quite a nice thing, shortcut. Of course, you can script it, but in case you don't know, don't want to remember, or even Kubernetes, which is more complicated command-wise, then this is quite handy. And it builds a base to the last thing I want to add here, which is GitHub Actions. See this add GitHub Action. Because you have deployed that locally, all is running fine, but how do you hook it up to CI? And the most prominent or most used CI that is now there nowadays is GitHub Actions. So what we do there, we give you little GitHub Actions workflows for testing, for releasing. So testing basically is just a call out. You might guess it to npm and test, right? So that's easy. CF is called whenever you push out to main, but you can also change it, of course. What it will do, it basically sets the CF or logs into CF with the credentials that you need to store as variables and secrets in your space or your repository at GitHub. And then we meet our friend CDS up there, right? This is the connection. What it also will do, it grabs the logs always, even if it fails, for the SRV and for the deploy application, so that in GitHub Actions, you see these logs and can then debug them really nicely. And it will also give you the fetch the URL. What that looks like here, you see that it will then give you a little deployment section where if you click on that, it will give you the URL, right? And also will give you the logs, all in one go, so to say, right? So it's a nice, I think, a nice start to for GitHub Actions. Nothing magic, but quite a nice start, I guess. All right, that was GitHub Actions, and the last thing I want to promote, coming back to my slides, is Cap Console, a complete new thing. really interesting, that builds on what I've just shown you around deployment, and that is shown. Am I still audible, by the way, DJ?
Sorry, what do you say, Christian? Are you still what?
Am I still audible? Yes, because
Yes, you're still audible. Yep, yep,
okay,
yep.
my Zoom call was frozen. Okay, Cap Console, give it a go. It's happening, I think, at 1:30 today
Yep.
by the colleagues. Again, a complete new tool around deployment and monitoring and setting up things. Really nice. All right, that was my 2 cents here.
That was a 2 cents spent very well. Thank you, Christian. That was amazing. It's almost like Christmas has come early. It's like open up this bag of presents, of gifts to dig into. I mean, there's so much stuff to look into more. So we had a few questions in the chat. I'll relay those as they appeared. A couple of questions first from Abhijit Kankani. The first one I sort of half answered. So basically, when you were looking at IntelliJ, the question was, so this IntelliJ IDE is only for Java, or we can use for Node.js as well? So I said, yes, IntelliJ is very popular with Java developers. There's a sort of a connection in my mind there. But of course, it's perfectly great for any language, including Node.js, right?
Yeah, they have really a very good coverage of the different languages. I think for Node.js JavaScript specifically, it's called WebStorm, right? And we have quite a few people here also in-house that use that for JavaScript development.
Yeah. Excellent, excellent. Thank you. And also another question from the same Abhijit. When you were doing talking about testing, the question was, do we need to install Jest or it's part of Baz for testing?
If you're using the Node.js built-in test runner, you don't need Jest,
exactly,
so to say, right? That's a nice thing. It's built in. It's always available. I think they also like add more features from version to version. So it's quite an interesting alternative to Jest. Jest again is feature-wise more powerful, having been there for years and years, right? But also it's a bit bigger, the package. So if you're concerned with the development dependencies and having them like under control, so to say, you might want to check out the built-in Node test run.
Exactly. And also maybe this is a bit of a philosophical second answer from me, which is that with the CDS-test affordance from the CAP tools, I like to lean on these affordances because they do all the heavy lifting, and I don't know or care what actually is being called in the back. So maybe right now Node test is being called, but in the future something else might be called. But this is all abstracted away for me as a developer. So I'm going to go primarily for CDS test rather than have to remember Jest or the Mocha things or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't rolled out CDS test big time, but just to give you the chance also to have some feedback, if you like it, absolutely go for it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So we had another question from Abhijit Ranjan. To be honest, I didn't quite understand the second half of this question, but maybe Abhijit can clarify, or maybe Christian, you'll know this anyway. Can SSH, when you were talking about the debug, the remote debug, can SSH be made user session specific? I'm not quite sure what you mean there, Abhijit. Christian, do you know?
No, not really.
Okay. Well, we've still got a chance for Abhijit to put in the chat. I've asked already for clarification. But basically, that also reminds me to say that in order for this CDS debug of remotely deployed applications to work on Cloud Foundry, SSH has to be enabled for that deployed application, which of course you can do with CF enable SSH and so on. So that there is that thing as well. It's all in the documentation, right?
Yes.
So Javier says comments that the integration with GitHub Actions looked pretty cool, and I would definitely agree with you there, Javier. Christian, good morning, Christian Fisra. Better approach than using username and password. I'm not quite sure what that was in reference to. That was just now, so I'm not sure. A question just now from Sefar. Chichekli, is that? Sorry if I've mispronounced your surname. I guess the new CDS plugin on IntelliJ only supports CAP CDS, but not ABAP CDS, right?
That is true. So basically everything I've told you now was for CAP CDS, not ABAP CDS. I guess their strategy is really Eclipse. Maybe a different new IDE or different IDE in the future. I cannot tell you anymore. But IntelliJ, I don't think it is on their roadmap.
Yeah.
Sorry for that.
I think we, in the CAP family have adopted and embraced IntelliJ because, a lot of developers in the open source world, which therefore include a lot of, Java developers and Node.js
Yeah.
developers, are already using that, and it was a desired target IDE, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing you need to remember that, or just from an internal perspective, it was quite easy for us to add IntelliJ support because we had the LSP powers already. So it wasn't a big deal to add that. While for ABAP, the ABAP programming model is not only CDS, you need a lot more editors.
Yeah.
And it's extremely expensive, so to say, effort-wise, to implement that tool suite, even partially in a different IDE.
Yes. I mean, to be fair to the amazing team that created ADT, ADT was built 10, 15, maybe more. I remember it being built, and it was well before the concept of a language server and a language server protocol was even in existence. So
I know. I was there. I was there because I was one of the founding developers of ADT.
Amazing, with Thomas Ritter and co.
Yes.
Fantastic times. Okay, so I think that's all the questions. I'm going to ask a question, which is, when you go back, can you go back to that test suite call and maybe just explain to my small brain and maybe the lovely people in the chat as well, what that syntax was there? Because we've got the await get, and that's a tag template there, but the structure of that relative URL, OData v4 admin service dot books, and then you have this sort of this variable as well.
Yeah, it's basically just like reading that, or like passing on that variable as into the get call, basically. It's just basically adding the select query as a query parameter to that URL.
So basically, it's injecting a literal object, isn't it, with the black curly brackets inside.
You mean this? Yeah, these double. Yeah, it's quite fancy syntax, admittedly.
Yes,
absolutely.
But also, I'm curious about the dot books, admin service dot books. What sort of syntax is that?
Well, that's basically the name of the entity. Because if you look there,
I never knew you could do a dot instead of a slash.
I guess that's the normal syntax. Let's check that real quick with CDS watch and the index page.
That'd be amazing.
We don't have, we have here the index HTML. Let's remove that real quick so that it gets out of the way. So it's admin service dot books. Okay, well, Alice, you're right. You're right. See that's the shortcut, so to say. Yeah, because it's already we are in the admin service, and then we're requesting the books, while that one here makes use of the fully qualified entity name. I think that's the difference here. And both call patterns are valid. You have a good point, but because I was so used to seeing that, but also using this one, I haven't spotted the difference. Yeah, that's a good point.
Amazing.
Both is available.
Okay, so thank you, Christian. So the last thing is that I think Christian comes in with a really good comment about Abhijit Ranjan's question, which was, I guess he means debugging a specific user session, like in good or SAP GUI debugging, you could set external breakpoints for a specific user. And Abhijit says yes, but I think that's not, we're not quite there yet.
No, we're not quite there. So what you basically do when you operate that browser, I think it was here, right? You using the session of the user that is logged in here.
Yeah.
And that's the one to use. If you want to use a different session, well, use an anonymous browser window, open the URL there, and you can then log in you with a different user. So that's the way things work here. We don't have a way to intelligently change or swap the user. That's not available.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, I think we're done. We're just
nice.
out of time. Fantastic, Christian. Thanks for joining, sharing all the
thank you too.
The tool news, what's hot and what's new and everything. Kicking off today, a cap day. Next up, I can't remember. Is it at the top of the next hour? I think it is. We have CAPS BDFL, Daniel Hutzel with best practices, hosted by me. So stay around, and I'll put the thing on LinkedIn and everything. But if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you will already get a reminder. So it just goes for me to say thanks to everybody who joined live in the chat and gave their comments and questions, which was brilliant. And thanks to you, Christian.
Absolutely. Thank you too. And always a pleasure to be here.
Okay. Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.